Hello and welcome everybody to another video. Today I'm going to be breaking down the upcoming Senate election in Washington and talking about whether or not the state is in play for Republicans or potentially winnable. Before I start, I just want to ask, if you are new, please consider subscribing and leaving a like on the video. Okay, so recently a poll came out of Trafalgar Group that had the Washington Senate ballot only 3 points behind for Republican Tiffany Smiley over Patty Murray, the incumbent Democrat in the state of Washington. Now, I want to speak a little bit on the candidates first. Patty Murray, typical Democrat, really not good on any policy whatsoever, but Tiffany Smiley, I believe from my research, more of a moderate Republican, not my favorite person, not an amazing candidate, but in a state like Washington, at least right now, realistically, that's the best you'll get. And I don't think a really conservative candidate could win in a state like Washington, at least not at this current moment. The state is a safe Democrat state. So it's unlikely that you could really have a decent candidate win there. But even the fact that the polls have it this close is something to consider and look at. So we can see it's only about 3 points, about a 3 point margin that Tiffany Smiley is behind, with a 4.5% undecided. So there is a chance that even if these break only about, I think, around 75% for Smiley, she could potentially win. She'd have to get pretty much all of them. But if these do end up breaking for Smiley, this is winnable. And again, party participation, this generally lines up with the actual party affiliation of the state itself. Republicans about 33, Democrat about 44. This more or less aligns, and then the rest being non-aligned, as you can see here. Now, the more independent voters right now are breaking Republican, which is why I do think, as you can see right here, Tiffany Smiley is currently getting so much of a margin out of this poll. Now, most of these voters do seem to be breaking for Smiley. The rest of them that haven't really decided yet, there's a good chance that they could break for Smiley. And I think if they more or less break in the similar margin they have here onto this, there is a chance that Smiley could pull ahead. And we also have to consider overall polling trends and how accurate polls are in general. Currently, out of Rasmussen's report, as of, I believe, yesterday, the generic congressional ballot still had Republicans ahead by about 5, Rasmussen being more or less more accurate than a lot of other pollsters. Now, we have to also consider, on average, most pollsters, even the left-wing ones and the right-wing ones, both of them, the more balanced ones, it doesn't really matter. They all, for the most part, seem to underestimate Republicans by a little bit to a lot. So it's very possible that even if this may be a bit of an oversample or an overestimate, that it could even be an underestimate, and there is a chance that we could win this seat. Now, again, not going to be the most conservative Republican, but it's better than having Patty Murray, and who knows, it might start trending the state to the right. So, as you can see, most of these things, most of this is fairly consistent. This makes sense. The state itself, the demographics are about this. So, the poll is a fairly decent poll. I think this is probably pretty accurate to what could potentially happen. And if we consider the party affiliation, this is an accurate, more or less, sampling of what the voter base would be in the state at this current moment. If we do look back to 2016, when Patty Murray ran, this is her, I don't know, I think her first race. She won by 18 points in the state of Washington. She won mostly because this region of the state votes very far to the left, especially the Seattle area, and even up here. It gets closer in some of these counties, but most of it comes down to Seattle, which is by far the largest part of the state. That's where most of the voting comes from. Jefferson County isn't very big. It did vote fairly Democrat, but as a whole, it's more or less decided by Seattle. But if Smiley can get the margins closer in, like, doesn't have to win, but if she can get the margins closer in, like, Snohomish County or Skagit, Mason County, like, any of these counties, Grays Harbor, Pierce, or Pacific County. These aren't very far out of reach. Even Clark County down here, this one is quite large. Like, if she can make up enough ground in these counties, she has a chance to win it. Same with Whitman. Like, the counties are close enough, and if her margins can increase in the counties, she's already winning here. They're fairly close, but it's very possible that she can make up margins over Chris Vance's margins in 2016. She can definitely get very close, and I do think there is a chance it's winnable. Like, yeah, some of these are very small, so that's why ultimately it doesn't have a huge amount of an impact, but Benton County, if you can get those margins up a bit more, that's helpful. It's a decently large county. Same goes for Yakima and a number of counties around here. Spokane County, a very large county. That was very close. If she can get the margins up even about 5 points there, that'll have an impact. And as a whole, Seattle, it could get a bit closer as well. She could get the margins closer. If she can even get Patty Murray down to 70% in Seattle and she can get around 30%, that would have a decent impact on the overall result. And her being a fairly moderate candidate could potentially win more in these suburban areas. It's possible she could reverse some of the trends a little bit and push the state closer to a winning category. Again, as you can see, King County, or basically Seattle County, King County, is the biggest. That is where 700,000 of Murray's votes came from. That's almost half of her voting, of her support. And then there's also Pierce and Snohomish County. These two can also both get fairly closer. Again, like I said, these are fairly close counties, to be fair, considering they're not far out of reach. Like, I don't think they're winnable, but I do think there's something that we could potentially reach for. And you know what? This is just a trend we're seeing in general around that area, especially in Oregon as well. We've seen this kind of trend where, yeah, this one's more of a, well, the Democrats are splitting their vote, but in that region, it seems like there's a chance we could have a Republican senator in Washington and a Republican governor in Oregon. Now, I actually think Oregon will probably go Republican at this case with the current polling, but that's not that important. That's another video. Despite that, looking at this poll, there is a real chance. And realistically, I think when it comes down to it, if the Republican Party puts more funding into an election like this, I don't think this is the most important one to be focusing on right now. I think there are more important elections like Pennsylvania, like Nevada or Arizona, but this is still something to consider, and it would be better at least spending the money that we've been wasting in Ohio, a pretty much safe seat at this point. Spending it on this would be better. At least we'd be somewhat increasing the potential Senate. This, I think, is winnable if Republicans don't just drop the ball. Anyways, that's my breakdown. I do think the Republicans can win this seat, and I think we might still win it. It'll depend. We'll see more as we get closer to the election. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. Comment, let me know what you think about the Washington Senate race. Do you think Republicans can win it? Anyways, that's all for now. Hope you guys have a good night.